My name is Helen McRae. I'm 56 years old, and until last Friday, I was the director of operations at Nexora Labs, a fast-growing tech distribution firm based in Columbus, Ohio. For 20 years, I built everything that kept that company running. From the shipping systems to the vendor relationships, from training new staff to managing supply chain crises, my fingerprints were on every successful process in that building. And yet, there I was, sitting in a corner office across from Tyler Brennan, the founder's 32-year-old son, as he leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk that said he thought he had everything figured out. "Let's be honest, Helen," he said, folding his hands like he was the one doing me a favor. "Women your age just don't keep up with where this industry is headed. I need people who can move faster, adapt quicker." I sat perfectly still, hands folded, face composed. I'd dealt with worse over 2 decades, but that one sentence stung in a way I hadn't expected, not because it surprised me, but because I'd seen it coming for months. Tyler had been slowly taking over after his father, Robert, began stepping back, and with every passing week, it became clearer that he was more interested in flashy innovation than tested wisdom. He replaced experienced managers with fresh out-of-college hires who spoke in buzzwords, but didn't know the first thing about real logistics. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I showed up early, stayed late, took the time to walk his new hires through systems that took years to perfect, but none of that mattered now. He'd already made up his mind. "I completely understand," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You have to do what you believe is best for the company." That caught him off guard. He was expecting resistance, maybe even tears. Instead, I offered a polite smile and asked, "When would you like me to wrap up my projects?" He blinked. "Yeah, end of the week should be fine. HR will process the paperwork." Without another word, he turned his attention back to his computer screen. Just like that, 20 years of loyalty were dismissed with a click. I walked out of his glass-walled office, past the operations floor I designed, and into the hallway I'd walked every day for 2 decades. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. I just walked out with my head high and a plan already in motion. Tyler Brennan thought he was firing an outdated woman. He had no idea he was unleashing a storm. My first day at Nexora Labs felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, the company was just a dozen of us packed into a rented warehouse with second-hand desks and a fax machine that barely worked. We didn't have systems, we had chaos. But I saw potential. I started as a logistics coordinator, but I wore every hat imaginable. I negotiated shipping contracts, built spreadsheets from scratch, tracked packages by hand, and slept in the office during peak seasons. Slowly, with a lot of trial and even more error, I built structure from disorder. As we grew, I designed the entire operations framework, inventory software, vendor relationships, fulfillment timelines. I documented every single process, made them scalable, and trained each new hire myself. I had a hand in every contract, every cost-saving improvement, every successful expansion. When the company finally moved into our new headquarters, glass, steel, and polished concrete, I was the one who planned the transition, down to which crates arrived first, and which needed security clearance. Tyler was still in college then, probably learning buzzwords I was too busy to care about. For 20 years, I said yes. I mentored younger managers, covered for absent executives, stayed silent when others took credit. I didn't mind. I believed in the work. I believed in loyalty. But loyalty, I've learned, is only loyalty if it goes both ways. Tyler never asked about the systems I'd built. He never sat in on one of my department reviews or listened to the warnings I gave about overloading new hires. To him, I was just part of the old guard. When he started replacing seasoned professionals with recent graduates who couldn't read a warehouse schematic, I bit my tongue. I thought, let them learn. They'll figure it out. But they didn't. And Tyler didn't care. What stung wasn't just the dismissal, it was how effortless it was for him. Like I was a printer past its warranty. Like 20 years meant nothing. I boxed up my framed photos, my notebooks filled with annotated maps and flowcharts, and the brass nameplate that had sat on my desk for nearly 2 decades. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. But something inside me shifted. If they didn't value experience, someone else would. And I already knew exactly who. James Morrison had been trying to recruit me for years. He was the vice president of operations at Veltrix Optics, one of Nexora's fiercest competitors. Every time Nexora landed a major contract or streamlined a new system, James would call. "Helen," he'd say, "we need someone like you. Name your price." For the longest time, I turned him down. I was loyal to Robert Brennan. He'd given me my first big opportunity, trusted me when no one else would, and let me grow into a leadership role without a fussy MBA or a flashy resume. I stayed because I believed in what we were building. But loyalty doesn't mean watching a company burn from the inside out. A few months ago, when Tyler started making sweeping changes, gutting departments, shifting priorities, without understanding how they worked, I reached out to James. Quietly. We began having lunches, always off the radar, always just catching up. But he knew. I knew. The day was coming. When Tyler fired me on that Friday morning, it just so happened I already had a lunch scheduled with James that same afternoon. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe my instincts knew before I did. We met at a quiet little Italian place downtown. James didn't waste time. "You're free," he said, grinning across the table. "When can you start?" I slid a thick folder across to him, handwritten notes, diagrams, shipping routes, vendor contact sheets, system blueprints. All legal. All mine. There was no non-compete clause in my termination. Tyler had been in such a rush to get rid of me, he didn't bother to lock anything down. James flipped through the folder slowly, his eyes widening. "These vendor contracts alone, Helen, this could save us millions." I nodded. "And their three biggest accounts, Westell, Microsystems, and Tech Solutions, are up for renewal within 60 days. I know exactly what terms they're looking for." James leaned back, still holding the folder like it was gold. "I think this is going to be the start of a very profitable partnership." I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. Tyler thought he was pushing me out. In reality, he was freeing me. And now, with the full weight of my experience and knowledge behind a company that actually wanted me, it wasn't revenge I was after. It was results. And I was just getting started. I spent the weekend doing what I do best, organizing chaos. By Monday morning, I was already consulting remotely for Veltrix Optics. James had arranged for everything to move quickly. Their legal team had reviewed my termination documents and confirmed what I already knew: no restrictions, no limitations. I was free to share every system I had built. Back at Nexora, I kept things quiet. I still had a few days left to officially transition out, so I showed up like usual, early, professional, composed. Tyler held a company-wide meeting that Tuesday morning. He stood at the front of the conference room with his best visionary voice and declared, "We're moving into a new era. We need leadership that understands the direction of the future. That's why we've made strategic personnel changes." Strategic. That was his word of the week. I stood at the back of the room, watching the faces of people I'd worked with for years. They weren't fooled. They knew exactly who had been cut and what that meant. After the meeting, one by one, colleagues stopped by my office. Janine, my assistant operations manager, was first. "This is insane," she whispered. "You designed everything. The software, the vendor databases, the routing algorithms. How does he think we're supposed to function?" I smiled gently, continuing to pack my things. "You'll figure it out." Tyler seems confident. What I didn't tell her was that I had already documented every password, every backend configuration, every single protocol, and sent it to my personal email for reference. Not theft. Just preservation of my work. I knew which systems would break down first, which vendors required direct contact, which contracts had hidden contingencies that only I had memorized. And by Tuesday afternoon, I was already making calls. The first was to Patricia Holmes at Westell Distribution. She and I had worked together for nearly a decade, and I knew where her loyalties lay. "Helen, please tell me it's not true," she said the moment I called. "I'm afraid it is," I replied. "Tyler believes the company needs younger leadership." There was a pause, then a scoff. "That boy doesn't know what he's doing." "I'm with Veltrix now," I said. "If Westell is ever interested in exploring new partnerships." "Send me a proposal," she interrupted, "today." By Thursday, I'd had the same conversation with Gerald Perkins at Microsystems and Andrea Sullivan at Tech Solutions. Each of them responded the same way. Polite shock, and then immediate interest. Tyler thought he'd save the company by replacing me. He didn't realize he'd just handed me the keys to its collapse. Friday morning, I arrived at Nexora for what was officially my last day. Bradley Brown, the new operations manager Tyler had hired straight out of business school, was already at his desk, hunched over his computer. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Morning, Bradley," I said casually. "How's the onboarding going?" He looked up, clearly stressed. "Helen, thank God you're here. The shipping system won't generate optimization reports, and the inventory software keeps crashing. I can't figure out what's wrong." I kept my tone calm. "Have you updated the vendor portal passwords? They reset every 90 days. "Vendor portals?" His face went blank. "Tyler didn't mention anything about that." "Of course he didn't." "There are 17 of them," I said, "each with its own credentials and update schedule. If they aren't synced properly, none of the routing software works." Bradley went pale. "Could you walk me through it?" he asked, almost pleading. I checked my watch. "I'd love to help, but I have a meeting with HR in 10 minutes. And then lunch." That lunch wasn't just any lunch, it was the final signing meeting with Patricia Holmes from Westell Distribution. The account was now officially Veltrix's. By the time I returned from HR, I had one last phone call waiting at my desk. "Helen McCrae, Operations Director," I answered automatically. "Helen, it's Gerald Perkins. I need to talk to you about our contract renewal." "I'm no longer with Nexora, Gerald. You'll need to speak with Tyler Brennan." "That's what I was afraid of," he sighed. "You know our systems, our budget, our timeline. We're not comfortable continuing without you. Where are you going?" "I'm now with Veltrix Optics. James Morrison is heading the operations division." There was no hesitation. "Have him call me Monday. We're ready to move." I looked across the office. Tyler was behind the glass wall of his corner suite, smiling and gesturing into the phone, completely unaware that his 3 largest clients had just walked out the door. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new role at Veltrix. The team welcomed me with open arms. No suspicion, no ego, just respect. By Monday morning, Nexora's shipping systems had fully crashed. None of the vendor portals were responding. The security protocols I'd designed had triggered password resets for every external partner system just as scheduled. And no one remaining at Nexora knew the pattern. They called, repeatedly, emails, voicemails, even Robert Brennan reached out. But I didn't answer. Because this wasn't just about systems and contracts anymore. This was about respect, about consequences. And Tyler Brennan was about to learn both the hard way. Tuesday morning, my personal phone buzzed at 7 a.m. It was Tyler. I let it go to voicemail. "Helen, this is Tyler Brennan. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We need to talk about the operations transition. Our systems are experiencing technical difficulties, and Bradley needs your assistance with authentication protocols." No apology. No acknowledgement that he had fired me just days earlier with a condescending speech about age and adaptability. Just panic disguised as professionalism. I deleted the message and poured my coffee. At Veltrix, things were moving fast. We had 3 new major clients and a logistics team eager to implement my systems. I was busy, focused, empowered, and finally working somewhere that valued knowledge over flash. Around mid-morning, James Morrison knocked on my door. "Robert Brennan is in the lobby," he said. "He's asking to see you personally." I closed my laptop. "Send him up." Robert entered my office looking like he hadn't slept in days. His silver hair was unkempt, his tailored suit wrinkled. He collapsed into the chair across from me. "Helen, I owe you an apology," he began. "Tyler told me this was mutual, that you wanted to pursue new opportunities." "That's not what happened," I said simply. "I know. Janine told me everything. The comments about your age, the way he dismissed your work. That's not who we are." I didn't respond. I just let the silence stretch until he filled it. "I need you to come back," he said. "Full reinstatement, 20% salary increase. And Tyler will report to you." Tempting. But I pictured Tyler's smug face from the week before. The way he dismissed 2 decades of work with a smirk. "I appreciate the offer," I said. "But I'm quite happy where I am. Veltrix values experience." Robert slumped in his chair. "Then at least consult. Just temporarily. Help us salvage what's left. Bradley is lost. Our clients are furious. Vendors won't return our calls. My rate is $500 per hour. Minimum 40 hours per week," I said. He blinked but nodded. We'll pay it. You'll also need a written acknowledgement from Tyler publicly posted accepting responsibility for his actions and apologizing for his comments. Robert's jaw tightened. He's hesitant. Legal is worried about liability. Then we don't have a deal. I slid the contract he brought back across the desk. I don't work for people who won't acknowledge their mistakes, I said. As Robert stood to leave, I added one final note. By the way, if your team doesn't reset the vendor credentials by next Monday, you'll lose access to your shipping networks entirely. He paused in the doorway, visibly shaken. The damage wasn't done yet. But it was coming. Wednesday afternoon, the moment I had anticipated arrived. Tyler Brennan walked into the Veltrix Optics lobbies. Gone was the arrogant posture, the swagger, the condescension. In its place was a man barely holding things together. James Morrison called me in advance. He's on his way up. Says he needs to speak with you directly. Send him in, I said, calmly arranging my desk. When Tyler stepped into my office, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, he began, trying to sound composed. Of course, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. How can Veltrix Optics help you today? He winced at the formality. Cut it out, Helen. You know why I'm here. The vendor systems are locked. Clients are leaving. The shipping network is collapsing. You designed it all, and now it's unraveling. You're right, I said. I did design it. Over 20 years. And you fired me because you thought I was too old to understand innovation. Tyler tried to interrupt. Maybe I was hasty. Maybe I underestimated. No, I cut him off. You didn't just underestimate me. You dismissed me, without preparation, without consultation, and with language that was discriminatory and disrespectful. He shifted in his seat, looking younger than ever. I made a mistake, he muttered. You made a decision, I corrected, and now you get to live with it. He looked up, desperation in his eyes. Just help us, name your price. I already did, I said. A public apology, in writing, sent to all vendors and clients, acknowledging your mistake. That would ruin me, he whispered. I leaned back in my chair. No, Tyler, that would redeem you. The next morning, news broke that Nexora Labs had lost their contract with Continental Express, their largest and longest-standing shipping partner. Without that, they couldn't deliver a single order. Bradley Brown resigned. His email cited unrealistic expectations and a lack of support. And then, my phone rang. Robert Brennan again. Tyler's agreed to issue the apology, he said. We'll do whatever it takes. I looked out my office window at the Veltrix trucks lining up in synchronized motion, each one moving according to the protocols I had designed. It's too late, I said gently. The damage is done. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Tyler tried to erase 2 decades of work. Instead, he spotlighted its value. And as for me, I wasn't obsolete. I was just getting started. Sometimes being discarded is exactly what frees you to flourish. Experience isn't a weakness. It's leverage. And I had finally used mine.